It's time for some disturbing, anonymous confessions. About 10 years ago, I accidentally sent an escort to my boss's hotel room. I just started working for a Chinese company in a pretty high position. Since I was the only non-Chinese employee, they often sent me to trade shows in China to prove the company wasn't entirely local. One time they sent me to Guizhou to a hotel called Dawn Fawn near the Expo Center. That detail isn't super important, but it proves this story is real. Because of the big trade show, the area was buzzing with professional cuddle representatives and their agents. They handed out business cards, and the people handing them out were tiny kids, maybe 10 years old or younger. Their one English phrase was always, "You buy? So cheap." 2 days before I was set to fly home, I went downtown to buy gifts for my wife and daughter. Right away, a persistent older lady glued herself to my side, chanting, "Buy! Very cheap!" I kept explaining I was married and not interested. She just kept smiling, "Wife not here! You buy cheap!" Finally, she asked, "Room number?" I said, "Girl, only $200. I figured the quickest way to shake her was to give a random number. "200, sure. I'm in 1024, I said, and walked off. I completely forgot about it. The next day, last day of the expo, I was told my boss had flown to Beijing and someone needed to grab something from his room. A colleague and I headed back to the hotel, dodging card-waving kids, until we stopped in front of room 2024. I never dared mention it to my boss. Only my wife knows. Well, and now you do too. A few years back, I discovered a way to spam a coworker with endless read receipts from the same email. In our company, you can disable those "your message was read" notifications, but there was this one guy who insisted we all keep them on so he could track who'd opened his messages. He nagged so much that our manager finally told us to comply. After lots of experimenting, I figured out that if I saved an unread email into a desktop folder and made several copies, every time I opened one, it sent another read receipt. So I fired off a couple dozen notifications to him, just for that one email. He messaged me, asking why he was getting so many pings. I acted clueless, saying I'd only opened and replied once. A few days later, I sent another batch, and again, only for that same message. For weeks, I kept it going, sometimes one ping, sometimes 50. I'd open a random number of copies all at once. He got increasingly annoyed, convinced I was trolling him, and called IT. Tech support wanted to check my laptop. I came clean, explained I was just messing around and would stop. They closed the ticket with the classic line, "Looks like the issue's resolved," and suggested we disable read receipts altogether, which we finally did. I honestly feared I'd get fired for wasting time and driving a colleague bananas, but nothing happened. When I was 9, I caused the biggest wildfire our town had seen in 150 years. My older cousin, let's call her Pyrosis, age 14, came to stay for a couple of weeks. One day, I asked if we could go roast marshmallows in the woods. We built a tiny fire on a rock using newspapers and twigs. Then I started tossing random stuff in, leaves, cones, sticks, just to see what would burn. Pyrosis grabbed a lighter and set a leaf on a tree ablaze, then an entire branch. We laughed as flames crawled up. Soon we were lighting shrubs and trees until the fire wouldn't go out anymore. Summer heat plus dry grass equals speed run. We panicked and ran to a dirt road but didn't call 911 because I was terrified of big trouble. The blaze went out of control, an entire village had to evacuate, and firefighters fought it for 10 hours. No one was hurt, but later officials said it was the worst fire in a century and a half. I still regret convincing Pyrosis not to phone for help. About 8 months ago, I was driving solo to visit my parents. Most of the route went through an empty desert with almost no plants or traffic. Roughly an hour in, I spotted a guy in his 20s standing by the roadside, wearing shorts, a t-shirt, a backpack, and holding a water bottle. Hardly anyone drives that stretch, so I figured if I didn't pick him up, maybe no one would. At first, he seemed fine. We introduced ourselves, chatted, all normal. Then he started acting twitchy. He'd jerk his head sharply twice, make a weird face, and instantly go back to talking like nothing happened. Half an hour later, he brought up politics and got aggressively loud about his views. I tried to stay polite but give my own opinion. Suddenly, he cut me off mid-sentence and yelled at the top of his lungs. I froze, not sure what to do. Looking back, he was probably on some extra spicy snacks. By then, I no longer felt safe in my own car. I pulled over, told him to get out. He grabbed his stuff, and I drove off, leaving him at least 30 kilometers from the nearest town. When I reached my parents' place, I noticed he'd left his water bottle on the seat. I think he was okay, but part of me still wonders if I accidentally left some wild dude stranded just because I didn't want to deal with him for 2 more hours. In 3rd grade, I copied a poem from a book and won first place in a children's poetry contest. As a kid, I loved reading and writing. I'd stay up late devouring whatever I could find, especially the stack of children's encyclopedias at home. Dinosaurs, planets, world history, and more. One of them had stories and poems, and one piece about loneliness in nature hit me right in the soul. I copied it into my notebook, the same one where I kept my own writings, quotes, and things that inspired me. I was so young it never crossed my mind to note the author. It was just my private journal. A couple weeks later, my mom found the notebook while tidying up. She read the poem and assumed I'd written it. That evening she told me, glowing with pride, how beautiful it was. I wanted her to be proud, so I didn't confess that it came from a book. Months later, Mom saw an ad in the Sunday paper for a kids' poetry contest. She remembered my poem and insisted I submit it. That very day, we went to Dad's office so she could type it out. This was before home computers were common, and mailed it off. Since the poem was actually written by an adult but sent under the name of an 8-year-old, it naturally won first prize in my age group. My parents were over the moon. Meanwhile, guilt gnawed at me. A few weeks later, the poem, with my photo, appeared on the front of the newspaper's arts section, and I was invited to read it at the awards ceremony. I went, of course. Mom insisted. And honestly, what kid says no to free ribbons and gift cards? Still, I felt awful. Years later, when school lessons covered plagiarism, I felt like they were talking directly to me. I found that book, tore out the poem's page, shredded it, and tossed it wrapped in a clean pad so no one would ever find it. 20 years have passed. I know now it was just a kid's mistake, not the end of the world, but I still can't fully shake the guilt. I met my current boyfriend by slatting him my number while he was on a date with another girl, and I was their server. Back in the day, I worked at Cheesecake Factory. About a year and a half ago, my now boyfriend came in with some girl. They were clearly on a date. I don't know what exactly hooked me, but he just made my brain short circuit. Funny thing is, he's not even my usual type, but whenever I look at him, I just melt. He's got this confident smile, and something about the way he talks is hypnotic. Plus, he has this little giggle, then he looks down and bites his lip. Instant swoon. So I rushed over to their table. Normally, if I liked a guest, I'd go all out with service, partly because I wanted to chat with them and everyone else at the table, and partly because it often meant good tips. But with him, I couldn't stop myself from turning the flirt dial up to maximum rainbow sprinkles. My coworkers even warned me to chill or the guests might complain. He flirted back, and I was basically a shark smelling cotton candy in the water. I spent so much time at their table that other guests had to call me over because I'd forgotten about them. Looking back, it was more like a date between him and me than between him and that girl. We talked about his job, my school, favorite foods, his music taste, everything. I must have hung around for 40 minutes. Toward the end, the girl got quiet, answering us both with one-word replies. I figured she'd report me, so I said heck it, scribbled my number and slipped it under his card when I handed it back. He texted me that same night, and we've been dating ever since. This Friday, I'm moving in with him. Honestly, it was a bold and slightly sneaky move, but I'd 100% do it again. Please let me explain this one. Years ago, I volunteered for an organization helping adults with intellectual disabilities. I was supporting a woman during the last trimester of her pregnancy. She had a severe cognitive condition, and nobody knew exactly how she'd become pregnant. Most suspected a family member, which is why she'd been removed from their care and placed under guardianship. Doctors already knew her baby had serious complications and would live only a few hours after birth. We tried many times to discuss it with her, and while she said she understood, we weren't sure she truly did. I was with her during delivery. While the doctor tended to the baby, a nurse gently asked what name she wanted for her daughter. The woman said she'd just heard the most beautiful name ever from the doctor. Everyone in the room froze. She'd overheard a clinical word during the explanation, something like agina tear, and thought that was the perfect name. When we tried to explain, she became hysterical. It wasn't the right moment. Her child was dying, so we calmed her, and I promised to handle things. Later, as I helped fill out the birth and death paperwork, my finger just happened to slip, changing a single letter so the name looked like a normal one instead of, well, a medical term. I felt awful, but I couldn't let that poor little girl's gravestone carry something so bizarre. The mother couldn't read or write, and her social worker barely glanced at the forms before signing, relieved. The doctor signed too. Even now, I feel a pang of guilt, but I believe it was the kindest choice. I have a confession from my office life. I secretly toss out my coworkers' mugs and dishes when they leave them soaking in the shared sink. We've got a tiny office kitchen, and at the end of the day, some folks leave their dirty cups and bowls, sometimes with leftover oatmeal, just sitting in the sink to soak. There's even a sign that says, "Don't leave personal items in the kitchen. We're not responsible for lost stuff." I often stay late and see the night janitor come in. I notice he washes the dishes even though it's not in his job description. Our company only hires him for floors and trash, and we're supposed to clean up after ourselves. But apparently people figured out that everything magically gets washed, so they've stopped cleaning up altogether. Now they pile mountains of dishes, knowing by morning they'll be sparkling clean. Some even joke about the invisible dish fairy cleaning up after them. This has been going on for weeks, and they still have the nerve to complain about water spots on their mugs. So now, whenever I'm alone in the kitchen, I grab 1 or 2 items and toss them into the hallway trash so no one finds them. We share the building with other companies, and there are no cameras. So far, I'm in the clear. One coworker asked management about the disappearing mugs, but our manager just pointed at the sign and shrugged like, "Not my circus, not my llamas." Maybe I'm acting like a petty gremlin, but honestly, my colleagues are total waffle heads. I don't feel bad. I don't do this every day, only when the janitor doesn't come in. And I always do it during the day so no one thinks it was him. I keep track. Some coworkers are decent and clean up, so I only toss stuff that's been festering for a day or two. My boss couldn't care less. If anyone complains, he just gestures at the sign and says, "Your problem." Confession no one knows, once I lied to get revenge on a plane. I fly a lot, work plus vacay, so I've started recognizing the same flight attendants. Boarding queues always form 20 plus minutes early. I usually chill till the mob thins. One time I spotted Karen Vuitton, mid-40s, bleached hair, Louis bag, bulldozing through the line, even kicking a kid's tiny chair aside. When boarding started, guess who sat in the window seat I'd paid extra for? Yep, Karen Vuitton. I calmly told the FA it was my seat. Before he could reply, KV exploded, accused me of lying, and threatened staff. They eventually escorted her off. The cabin clapped, but I'd never spoken to her before. She wasn't in my seat. I just wanted payback for the kid thing. She missed her flight and had to wait 2 days. I get that people have rough moments, yet I sabotaged her trip out of spite. Still feel weird about it. About 13 years ago, I, a clueless 19-year-old, was hanging out at my buddy's place. The house was tiny, but about 25 people had crammed inside. I'd been sipping fruity lemony drinks all evening, even though I'm allergic to certain types of alcohol. Think hives, throat swelling, and, digestive fireworks. But hey, I was 19 and thought I was invincible. I was chatting with my crush when my stomach suddenly rumbled like an angry raccoon. Uh-oh, I thought in every sense of the phrase. I asked where the bathroom was. She pointed down the hallway, but a massive line of partygoers was already waiting. Meanwhile, my guts were staging a full rebellion. I remembered spotting a toilet in the basement. I dashed downstairs, clenching like my life depended on it. There it was, a pristine white throne. I shut the door, dropped my pants, and waddled over, only to discover it wasn't even hooked up to any pipes. Just sitting there for decoration, apparently. Panic mode activated. I scanned the room. My eyes landed on an open glass jar filled with dried flower petals. The lid sat nearby. Desperate times, desperate measures. I dumped the petals into the uninstalled toilet, placed the jar on the floor, and, well, let's just say I achieved maximum relief. But then came the second problem. Disposal. I couldn't leave it there, and my friends were calling from upstairs. I put the lid on, the jar was disturbingly warm, tucked it under my hoodie, and walked out like nothing happened. "What took so long?" asked my crush. "Oh, just freshening up," I stammered, terrified she'd notice I was smuggling a jar of doom. Everyone was gathered near the pantry by the garage door. My golden opportunity. I slid the jar onto a shelf next to identical jars and joined the group. To this day, I wonder, did someone ever open it? Did they think it was some kind of beef stew? Smell it? Toss it? I regret the whole thing, but I was in full-on crisis mode. That's my, jar-based confession. Thanks for watching. Drop your own confessions in the comments and check out our other vids. See you next time.